I'm John, and tonight I want answers about the debt ceiling. There's no stopping us now because we're live.
I'm John Thompson.
I'm John A. Vink.
I'm Keith Stattenfield.
I'm Loretta Beavers.
I'm AJ Minnick.
I'm Jennifer Sim.
I'm Jim too.
I am Bobby Chest. These stories tonight on John Wants Answers.
John wants answers. John wants answers. Give John answers. Give John answers. John wants answers. John wants answers. Give John answers now.
Man, the dancing is much better when we're in the same room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's synchronized.
Welcome to the show. Check your calendar. If it says October 14th, 2021, then we're live.
Is it October 14th? I thought it was the 15th all day long.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
You've been doing all of tomorrow's
I've been
work
writing
today.
October 15th on checks.
You can tweet us. You can tweet us at John Wants Answer. And then halfway through the show, I'll read the best tweets.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about them.
Sure.
We'll make
or
fun
you
of
can
them.
tweet me at Keith Explains. I have an S because I don't suck.
But your show's been canceled.
No. It's on hiatus.
KMVT refuses to
they've
accept
declined.
new episodes.
They
of
have
your show.
declined
Declined. Yes.
at present to let me come and tape new shows because, again, and they explained this, they're starting with the easy, not important shows.
That's not what they told me.
To get back on their feet after they had to move the whole studio by borough during COVID.
I know a guy, upper management here at KMVT.
Yeah.
And they said that John Wants Answers.
Yes.
Because it's award-winning.
Award
It's
winning.
one of their most treasured
Yes.
shows.
And
they were eager to get the show
their
back.
most livest, treasurest show.
Treasured and live.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Have you been watching the Jeopardy show?
I haven't been watching it.
But you're aware of the Jeopardy show,
I've
right?
heard of it. Yeah.
The game
yeah.
show.
I'm friends with a Jeopardy guy.
So Alex
I'm
Trebek.
friends with multiple Jeopardy guys, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I know a guy who is a contestant on Jeopardy.
Yeah. So do I.
I know two, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think they know me.
I know 4
You know four.
at least.
I know this Jeopardy? The guy who won, and then bought his FTP client that he worked on from
Yes.
university.
Yes.
Was that guy. There's a comedian, something Wood.
Yeah. Yeah. He's on our podcast.
He's on our podcast
Yeah, on the podcast we listen to. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm mentioned every month on that podcast. I don't know about you.
every month.
Every month they mention my name, apparently.
Wow. I gave him money one time.
I messaged with one of the hosts of that podcast just today. He's going to be in Alameda next week. You should go see his show.
Matt?
Yeah.
I want to see Matt.
Yeah, you should go see his show up in Alameda next weekend.
I'm driving to Canada. I won't be here.
Why are you driving to Canada? What's in Canada?
My peoples.
No, you're an American. We've gone over this.
I've shown you my passport. I'm Canadian.
I don't believe you.
Anyways, I'm sad to miss Matt.
Jeopardy. Yeah, sure.
Anyways, we're getting off topic here. So, I was watching Jeopardy.
Okay. Were
That's
you
a
watching
lie.
Matt? You
That's
were
a-
watching Matt?
No, I was watching Jeopardy, and
How are you watching Jeopardy and not watching Matt?
well, what do you mean? How's I not watching Matt?
Like he's been on the last 31 shows.
Matt who?
I don't remember his last name. He's the second highest winning guy in Jeopardy history.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't watch. I didn't see that one.
I don't think you've been watching Jeopardy then. Like he's been the guy on Jeopardy lately.
So I've noticed
Sure.
they give you the answers, and you got to come up with the question.
Yes, that's correct.
And it struck me that the answers sound insane for the questions.
Okay, it's a bit. Sure, go ahead. Yeah,
For
this
example,
is a bit.
let's say I asked you, Keith. I said, "Hey, Keith, what is a selfie?" Imagine you answered like that.
Well, I haven't seen Jeopardy recently, but I would think it would depend on the topic.
Uh-huh.
But I'm trying to think of what topics you might think of, and I'm going to say a selfie is Oklahoma. State of Oklahoma is one of several states that allows you to take a picture of yourself with your ballot, which had been thought to possibly be a violation of voter secrecy. But eventually they said, no, taking a picture of your ballot to show that you voted is in fact an indication of citizenship, and therefore it's fine. So that's what a selfie is. It's a picture of you with your ballot in a way that you can't actually see who you voted for, because that would be kind of creepy.
Okay. Here's another question I have for you, Keith.
Okay.
What is the brain?
Yeah, I know why. I know why this is something you need to think about. It's the organ. It's the organ that is frequently contrasted with brawn, muscles.
That clears it up. That clears it up
it
for
does.
sure, for sure.
You've heard about brain versus brawn, right?
Yeah. So it's the other one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where it comes from.
Keith, what is North Carolina? North Carolina, what is it?
Well, it's a state, John. I mean, didn't you have to study the United States in order to become a citizen?
This was not on the, not a
Oh,
question.
no, it's
Not
not.
a question
No,
on the test.
We don't. It's the state that's north of South Carolina. Back in the old days, we didn't have enough names, and so sometimes they would just take one good name, and then they would use it twice. Like that's the whole reason we got North Dakota. Like North Dakota was going to be one state called Dakota, and then it got to Congress, and Congress was like, we need more senators. Let's make North and South Dakota.
If we moved everyone from the Middle East
To
North and
North
South Dakota,
Yeah.
would that solve everything?
It would solve a lot.
Solve a lot.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, you've based much of your career on that idea.
Well, not my career. That's just a toss away idea I have that I think would solve huge numbers of problems.
Okay. John Wants Answers is heard on great TV stations, like Ipswich Community Media Access in Ipswich, Massachusetts. I stole that from Casey Kasem's Top 40 Countdown in the 80s. Remember that? In the middle of the show, he'd be like,
And the 90s and the 2000s.
he'd be like, American Top 40 is heard on great
Casey
radio
Kasem
stations.
did eventually
like
die, but I mean, wasn't he on the
KMMA.
air for like 40 years?
He started in the 70s, I think. Well, he was Scooby-Doo. He had a long
Yeah.
career. But he started doing the top 10 countdown. No, he got fired in the 80s.
I think it was 40.
Shadows-
Wasn't it 40? Wasn't it America's Top 40?
America's Top 40, yeah. And like in the 88, I think, Shadow Stevens took over. Or with Rick Dees. One of those guys took over from him. Got the axe.
We would not win on Jeopardy with that answer.
No. All right. Let's go to our first topic. The debt limit.
Yeah. We lived. We were worried last time.
Keith, what is the debt limit?
Assume you're talking about the U.S. debt limit.
The U.S. debt limit.
U.S. debt limit is a shorthand way of talking about the law which says there is a maximum amount of money the U.S. government can borrow in order, there's a maximum amount of money the U.S. government can borrow.
Okay.
And the U.S. government borrows money so that they can immediately give it to other people, because the government doesn't actually need to keep money laying around. So
Are you
in
saying our government
practice,
runs on a deficit?
well, our budgets have run on a deficit.
Oh, man.
And since we have run on a deficit for a while, we have accumulated debt.
Right.
And debt requires you to, if you owe a certain amount of money, you have to get that money from somewhere. And to do that, you borrow money.
What is the current debt limit? Like the dollar
Like
value?
$28 trillion.
20 trillion.
Yeah, it's like a lot of money.
So the law says we can't have more than
it's
28
like
trillion.
28 Jeff Bezoses.
But now that's the new debt limit that was just passed last week? Or this week?
I don't remember what the exact number is, but I think it's like 28. It's close.
So we were about to hit the debt limit, and then Congress got together and said, we have to raise the limit. And they did it just enough until December? Is that right?
So nominally, whether we've actually hit the debt limit or not is something no one can really say, because there are so many moving parts. In practice, the U.S. probably hit the debt limit over the summer. And they have been doing various accounting tricks in order for that not to matter, by paying things more slowly or by saying money that's going to come in has already arrived. But most reasonable people that, arrange finances the size of the U.S. government says we were close to actually hitting the debt limit to the point that the government can't, without extreme measures, continue to pay bills. So it was very recently that we would have said, well, we've hit the debt limit and now we're in a crisis. And last week, the Senate passed a bill to raise the debt limit by an amount that will roughly take us through early December. And that bill went over to the House, and the House passed it. And it
Why?
got sent to the President. The President signed it.
Why such a short amount of time? December seems really close. Why not like
Politics.
2 years?
Politics. I mean, there's no nominal need for a debt limit. Most countries don't have debt limits. Most countries, if they have to pay something, have said we are, in addition to saying we have to pay for these things, we are authorizing the government, if necessary, to borrow enough money to pay for the things that we have said the government has to pay for.
Okay.
In the United States, sometime in the 19th century, they kind of formalized this into a series of laws where they said, well, the government can borrow money up until this point. Before
There's
that,
no debt limit in the Constitution, right?
there's no debt limit in the Constitution. There is something in the Constitution that says Congress has to authorize the issuance of bonds. And Congress nominally does authorize the issuance of bonds in order to provide the executive branch the authority to issue those bonds and take the money that was brought in and use that to make payments that go out.
So the debt limit was established in the early 1900s, you're saying?
Sometime in the 20th century, early 20th century, they kind of came up with the debt limit.
Why do you think they decided they needed this debt limit?
Well, before that, whenever they got close to the point that they had to pay things, they would go to Congress and they would say, we would like to issue the next series of bonds. And Congress would have a vote, and they would issue them, and they would have authorized X amount of bonds.
So instead now a debt limit means the executive branch can issue bonds up until that limit, but I'm going to Congress every time.
Correct. So,
Okay, so it's
instead of
streamlined.
saying we're going to authorize the issuance of 70,000 bonds at $20 a piece, we are going to authorize the executive branch to raise funds in ways we have previously described up to this total amount.
Okay.
And generally that's by issuing bonds. I mean, the government you can sell things and bring in money, which doesn't require you to change the debt limit.
How often do we hit this debt limit?
It entirely depends on how much they raised the debt limit to last time and how much money the government spends every unit of time and how much money the government raises every unit of time.
It seems like we go through this every
Every time
couple
there's a
years.
Democratic president? That's correct. It seems like we go through this
Well,
every time
even-
there's a Democratic president.
In the last administration, we had to raise the debt limit twice.
We did, but do you remember any consternation about it?
No, I remember everyone working together, realizing it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and they pretty quickly brought forth a bill, and the large majorities in each house of Congress voted, and it was done.
What's different now?
What's different is Republicans seem to believe you can use the debt limit as a lever to force other changes to happen. So they won't vote for it unless X and Y and Z also happen.
Do Republicans
Or
hate
they
America?
won't vote for it because, politically in a campaign, if you can say my opponent voted to raise the debt limit and I didn't think America should be in debt that much, so I courageously voted against it. It's a little silly because the debt limit represents things the government has already agreed to pay for, things the government has already voted to pay for. And so many of the legislators that are saying, I refuse to raise the debt limit because I don't think we should be spending that money,
Because
also voted to spend that much money.
so the government passes a budget, and then that
And
passing of that budget could put the country over the debt limit.
the things the budget authorizes, or things other legislation authorizes, very almost certainly are what raises the amount of money the government spends,
Right.
and therefore how close we get to the debt limit. Or they pass legislation that lowers taxes, so lowering the amount of money that comes in, and if the amount of money coming in is less and the spending is the same, then you have a larger deficit
Right.
between those two, and the deficit becomes debt once that moment in time passes, and then debt builds up and you get to the debt limit.
Is every incoming administration really optimistic that they will be as great as Bill Clinton and finally balance the budget?
I have not. I mean, no.
I mean, Bill Clinton
in-
was the last president who balanced the budget, right?
Yes, although in practice, Congress, right, the presidents do what Congress has directed.
Right.
So it's Congress's job to balance the budget. The budget is a bill introduced in Congress, debated in Congress, and passed by Congress, and then sent to the president for his signature. Now, we have a large government. I mean, the executive branch drafts a lot of the documents of how much money needs to be spent based on what has previously been approved legislatively and what the reasonable, things you can foresee happening. How much money are we going to need for this? How much is it going to cost to do that? But those go to Congress, and in theory, Congress should say, here's the budget, and Congress can pass a budget which balances or which doesn't balance.
So Congress was able to pass, I guess it was in the late 90s or early 2000s, a budget that was balanced.
I think there were a year or 2 years when, in theory, the budget balanced. I think it was the late 90s and maybe 2000.
And then same Congress turned around and screwed that up.
Well, it would have been a new Congress because Congress changed when
Right,
George
right.
Bush was elected. I mean, after 9/11, the U.S. government authorized a very large amount of spending for the war in Afghanistan and then the war in Iraq.
We should get out of those
And
wars pretty soon.
fingers crossed. And a little later in the 2000s, they passed some fairly significant tax cuts. When they, I mean, there isn't a requirement that a budget balance on an annual or semi-annual or ever. And they play financial games with every bill as it is debated is supposed to get a rating from the Congressional Budget Office of how much does this bill cost over 1 year and 5 years and 10 years and over 30 years and over the lifetime of whatever.
Right.
And it is always a game playing opportunity. Sometimes they will push costs for programs out to, the 11th year. And then they can look at a 10-year forecast and say, this is great.
Doesn't cost anything.
They often, sometime in the early 2000s, they passed tax cuts, which sunsetted after 10 years. They said these tax cuts are going to be for 10 years, and then everything's going to go back to the way it used to be. Because that would let them say, well, this doesn't really affect the deficit long term, because these tax cuts are going to go away in the future. And so if you look at a 30-year, focus area, well, those last 20 years, these tax cuts are going to be gone. And so we're going to collect a lot of tax money. We're going to pay back all the debt we built up in the first 10 years. It is not surprising that tax cuts that are said to sunset frequently don't sunset. It is not surprising that rosy predictions about how much money, how much additional money will come in when you change how things work don't come to pass. But, you know, for almost all of my lifetime, we have very rarely had budgets that balance.
All right. What happens when we reach the debt limit and Congress doesn't raise it?
Well, not only the U.S. government can't pay someone that they are supposed to pay, and the government pays a lot of people every day, and the government brings in a lot of money every day because people pay taxes and user fees and lots of things. And so it is not like at debt limit day, the government suddenly can't pay anyone. They just can't pay all the people they ought to pay. So at that point, the government starts making decisions about which of their creditors they're going to pay and which of their creditors they are not going to pay.
It's called a shutdown.
Well, often the way they have done that is they have said to all federal employees, some of you are necessary employees who really have to be on the job 300,
Like
60
FBI
days a year.
agents, I imagine.
Well, yeah, like, I mean, if you're a customs guy and you're inspecting things as they come over the border, well, if we don't have custom guys, we can't bring stuff over the border, and that's bad.
Right.
So maybe a customs guy is an essential worker. We very frequently have said all of the people in the armed services are essential workers. We are not going to not pay our soldiers. The government has issued bonds, and bonds have ratings, and the ratings of bonds are largely based on the people that rate bonds' definition of how likely you are to get paid. And U.S. government debt is said to be, the
The top.
highest rating in the world because the U.S. government always pays off its bonds the day they become eligible to be paid off.
So it's never been a case where they haven't paid a bond.
I don't think the U.S. government has ever not paid a bond when it was supposed to,
Okay.
but maybe in the 1800s.
So if we
were-
hit the debt limit, we can't issue new bonds to pay off
They
the
cannot
old
issue new
bonds.
bonds. Well,
Unless,
they can't increase the amount of debt by more than the allowable limit.
so,
Bonds come due every week or
Yeah.
every month.
so they
So
can
as those
replace
bonds come due, they can
those
pay them
bonds
off,
equally, yeah.
issue the exact same bonds,
and your total
but
debt's
it
the
doesn't
same.
help you pay anything because you're going to issue the bond and bring in enough money to pay off the existing one.
So they can't issue new bonds to pay off other debts.
And they can't borrow money in other ways.
Can't the country just print new dollar bills and sell those?
That doesn't change how much money we owe.
But we have new magic money we just printed, and it will just pay off the debts with that new magic money.
Printing money isn't where money comes from. Printing money is a convenience. Like the amount of money the U.S. government has and the amount of printed money the U.S. government has issued are vastly different quantities.
Right. But where
Most
does new money come
the
from?
government, well, the Federal Reserve banks through the Department of Engraving and Printing, the Treasury takes money out of its account and uses that conceptual money to buy bills from the Department of Engraving
So they're just not
at
willy-nilly printing
par
money
value.
whenever they want?
I mean, the way money gets created generally is you have $100, you walk down to the bank and you put $100 in your checking account. You have $100. Now the bank loans me $75 because I want to go buy something. Now I have $75. How much money do you have?
I have $100.
So between the two of us, we have $175.
Wow.
Where did that $75 come from?
Magic.
That's where most money comes from.
where did the government get all this money to print money?
We just all agreed one day that that's how it was going to work.
Okay.
And then the system seemed to work for a while, and then we just kept agreeing, and we built very, very complicated economic structures.
There was a day in the past when the government had gold,
Yes.
and the paper represented a piece of that gold.
And not just the government. Banks used to be private businesses, and banks would have gold in their vault, and banks would issue banknotes.
Right.
And that was not the government at all. It was just a guy
So they
that
could
owned
give
a
up more
safe.
notes than they had gold.
And banks often gave out more notes than they had gold. And as long as not everyone showed up to get their gold back on the same day, the banks were okay.
If that happened, that's called a rush on the banks, right?
There were many rushes on banks.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's the debt limit. Holy crap, that ghost been behind me the whole time?
I don't know what you're talking about. There's TVs behind you.
Look, look at that ghost behind me.
I think it's a statue.
Speaking of ghosts,
Okay.
I'm watching.
I didn't know we were speaking of ghosts, but
I'm watching 3 shows on TV now
wow, at the same time?
about ghosts.
That's 3 more shows than I watch about ghosts.
So I'm watching the
Ghost Hunters?
Dad? previews for new shows coming out this
Wow,
fall.
have you run out of actual shows to watch?
Well, every fall you want to see what's new and watch the new stuff.
What, are you 7?
And so new show on CBS called Ghosts. I watched a preview.
Okay.
It looks hilarious. And when I do some more research, I find out it's actually a remake of a British show called Ghosts. Same name.
Wow.
And HBO,
Truly, we have run out of good ideas.
HBO Max has the original British Ghosts.
Okay, so
So I
you're,
start watching that show. Phenomenal. I don't want to give too much away.
is it about ghosts?
So this couple, they inherit this old, scary mansion.
Okay.
And so
Okay. Take 3. Take 3. They're not going to take 3, are they? I'm not going to see the old scary mansion. Was that picture behind you a picture from the old scary mansion?
no.
Oh, well, then don't take 3.
Okay. And so the lady hits her head and she's legally dead for like 5 minutes.
Okay.
Or she's in a coma, something like that.
It does that. I'm going to ask a doctor I know whether that happens later.
She wakes up, and because she was dead for a short amount of time,
Okay.
now she can see ghosts.
Okay.
Now,
Can
apparently-
other people see the ghosts?
No.
This
Only
is
because she's
like-
been dead for a short amount of time, she's got the ability to see ghosts. If you're dead, you can see ghosts. So
I saw a
now,
movie with Bruce Willis just like this.
so now she sees ghosts everywhere.
Okay.
And her husband does not see ghosts.
No, that's
So,
because there aren't
At
ghosts.
first he thinks she's crazy, but it turns out she's not crazy.
She is crazy.
So
There are no
watching-
ghosts.
so
Ghosts
that's
don't
Ghosts.
exist.
So watching that show, that's a British show.
Yeah.
The American show comes on.
Yeah. We know. We're doing the credits. John
British
wants
show
to talk
comes
about
on.
ghosts. British show comes on.
Same thing, same show. It's really the same show.
Okay.
And there's another show I found on Hulu. I signed up for Hulu. I pay for money for Hulu now. And they got a show called Deadbeat,
Can I borrow your Hulu password?
where he rescues ghosts who need to like pass on to the other side. So he
Is it a definition of a ghost someone who has passed on
No,
to the
no.
other side? They're
they're ghosts.
dead.
No, they're stuck
that's
here.
That's the side.
no. They go up or they go down. But if you stay here, you have unfinished business.
I'd like to stay here. I like it here.
Well, imagine if you
I
were
know
dead
all
and
my
you're still
stuff
here.
is.
What if you're dead and you were still here? You couldn't touch your stuff.
I don't know. I watched this show about after, and I'm not. As I understand,
seen
a
the
lot of
good-
people go to the naughty place.
Are you someone with a good place?
Almost everyone goes
Yeah.
to the naughty place.
Anyways, those are my shows about ghosts. They're all great shows.